I'd like to call the meeting of the Council of Mayors Executive Committee to order. As permitted by the Governor's disaster declaration of August 19, 2022, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting of this committee is not practical or prudent. To ensure the meeting is as transparent and open as possible, the meeting materials were posted 1 week in advance. A recording of this meeting will be linked onto the CMAP's website, and the committee will have to have a roll call anytime requiring a committee approval. Before I begin, I would like to make a few logistical announcements. This meeting is being recorded. Please use the mute function when not speaking. This will help eliminate excessive background noise. To members of the public, if you have a question during the meeting, please use the chat box. Staff will be monitoring it. Additionally, if you wish to address the committee during the public comment agenda, you can indicate your desire to do so in the chat box. And lastly, members of the committee, when making a motion, please include your name so the staff can properly record it. That concludes any meeting announcements. Thank you. The staff will now read the names of the committee members that are logged in and will then ask for committee members that were missed or on the phone to introduce themselves. Mary?
Okay, good morning. I'm going to run through the names of who I see on the call already. President Lungmas, Mayor Van Dusen, President Darch, President Hayes, President Sherwin, Mayor Tamburino, President Werner, President Einhorn, Mayor Kolosh, Mayor Shelkey, President Skillman, Mayor Rockingham, and Mayor Brent. Are there any members on the line whose name I did not call? Okay.
All right, thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is approval of the minutes. We've all, I believe, sent copies of them. Does anybody have any additions, corrections, notations? If not, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes.
So moved, President Lungmas.
Mayor Rockingham, second.
Okay, thank you. Mary, would you now take a roll call on the approval of the minutes?
Yes. President Lungmas?
Yes.
Mayor Van Dusen? President Darch?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes.
President Sherwin?
Yes.
Mayor Tamburino? President Gallagher?
Yes.
President Werner?
Yes.
President Einhorn?
Yep.
Mayor Kolosh?
Yes.
Mayor Shelkey?
Yes.
President Skillman? Mayor Rockingham?
Aye.
And Mayor Brent.
Yes.
So the minutes, those minutes stand approved. I have a notation here on my notes from the staff that at our last meeting, there were some administrative challenges with the minutes. And as a result, we will need to approve them again. So I will now entertain a motion to approve both the minutes for April 19th, 2022 and July 19th of 2022. Please remember to unmute yourself and state your name prior to making any motion. Do I have a motion and second?
Mike Einhorn Crete, so moved.
Mayor Rockingham, second.
Moved by Mayor Einhorn, second by Mayor Rockingham. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Okay. President Lungmas?
Yes.
Mayor Van Dusen?
Yes.
President Darch?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes.
President Sherwin?
Yes.
Mayor Tamburino? President Gallagher?
Yes.
President Brady?
Yes.
President Werner?
Yes.
President Einhorn?
Yes.
Mayor Kolosh?
Yes.
Mayor Shelkey?
Yes.
President Skillman? Mayor Rockingham?
Aye.
Mayor Brent.
Yes.
Motion's approved. I'm supposed to also ask, were there any questions in the chat box this time around about the minutes? Does anybody see anything in the chat box?
No, I don't see anything in the chat box, Mayor Schulte.
All right, thank you. So the motion is approved. All right, moving to 3, which is new business. And item 3-1 is the CMAP update. Erin Aleman, are you here with us?
I am here this morning, Mayor Schilke. Welcome. Hello. Good morning, everyone. First, I wanted to highlight that if you didn't see, Mayor Schilke was honored by his board naming the village hall after him. So congratulations, Mayor Schilke. I thought that was such a great honor to see in the news.
Thank you.
Of course. A couple things that I wanted to touch on. We have our board meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Board meeting will be in person. It'll be our first board meeting in person in quite some time. And we are thrilled to have our board members back in person to build the relationships and talk about the important regional issues that we're all facing. A couple of highlights that I'll be sharing with them tomorrow about some of the work we're doing to convene implementers around infrastructure bill funding opportunities. We've been working pretty closely with our congressional delegation and the county implementer, the DOTs, the Tollway, Chicago DOT, and others to talk about developing a priority list of projects for pursuit for some of these mega grant applications that are available over the next 4 years of the transportation bill. Other regions of the country have consensus lists that their regions have and are using those opportunities when they engage with their congressional delegation to provide them with this list of opportunities. I think one of the things it does for us is it makes us more competitive, it's organized, and it makes sure that we're not fighting amongst ourselves for these funds so that we can bring more of those dollars back. So we anticipate by the end of the year or so, we should have a coordinated list of projects that will be going after each of these large grants, like the RAISE grants, the infra grants, the, you name it, they all have new acronyms this time around. But we really want to make sure that we're being competitive, and we're also trying to think about how we can help support our municipalities in meaningful applications as well. One of the things that we're doing that will eventually do that is on Thursday, a grant application is due for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, which is a planning grant. We have successfully engaged, I think, almost all of our 7 counties and IDOT to pursue a joint $5 million application for federal funds to develop safe streets and roads for all plans for this region. Once those plans are complete, every municipality, our goal is to make sure that this makes you all eligible for hard infrastructure dollars for safety through the federal funds that will be available, which are about $1 billion annually. So we are excited to pursue this. I think we've got all of our ducks in a row. We've been working hard to make sure that the grant application meets the needs of our counties across the region, and that in doing so, it affords the opportunity for all of the counties, municipalities to be competitive for these funds. Again, I have presented to our transportation committee about the increase in fatalities across our region. We're seeing numbers of fatalities and serious injuries that are 30% above 2019 levels. It's particularly unacceptable. And I know that many of you have probably seen in the news that the most vulnerable users, children, we've had a number of fatalities of children on our roadways as well due to high speeds and just lacking safe infrastructure. So we take this seriously, but we're hopeful that we're successful in that application, and we'll keep you posted on that. We also will have a new technical assistance call for projects that will be coming up. Details will open here later this fall. Again, we'll keep you updated on when those open, and can continue to talk with you all and your peers about opportunities to engage with us through our technical assistance offerings. And then 2, I recognize that many of you have probably continued to pay attention to the news of the draft EIS for the potential merger of the Canadian Pacific and the Kansas City Southern merger that's under consideration right now. Last month, the STB released an environmental impact statement for review and public comment. We are presently reviewing the EIS. We sent an initial correspondence about some of our concerns and thoughts about what they should look to to evaluate through the EIS. So right now we're going through that detailed EIS and determining an appropriate response. We know that a number of correspondences have already been submitted by members of our congressional delegation. There was a hearing the other night, but I'll just provide a reminder that the public comment period is open until October 14th. And the final EIS and board decision are expected this winter. So now is really the time to weigh in on that. Also during today's meetings, the intergovernmental affairs team will be presenting the agency's federal and state advocacy agendas for this upcoming Congress and for the General Assembly beginning in 2023. The main priority guiding our agenda is to ensure the region has the resources needed to fully leverage all of the opportunities within the legislations that are out there, such as the infrastructure bill, or on the state side, CJA, that was passed since our last federal and state agenda was put together. So we've been convening the implementers across the region to make us most competitive. But I think in addition, there are a number of individual recommendations within our state and federal agendas that support and promote not only priority projects, but policy initiatives that are supportive of our counties, of our local municipalities in whole. So again, one of the things that will be a top priority for CMAP will be pursuing funding for the Regional Planning Act, which was never fully funded, which would provide CMAP with additional resources to continue to do long-range planning activities, water supply planning activities, a number of things that just the dollars that we get for transportation right now are a barrier for us to be able to do. So you'll hear a little bit more about that. But other than that, I just wanted to point that out for you right now. And I think that is all I have for you all. So happy to answer questions about anything that I covered.
Do we have any questions for Erin? I guess one question I would have, what time's the meeting start tomorrow?
Tomorrow's board meeting starts at 9:30.
Okay. Is that going to be available to watch on Zoom? Or?
It will also be live streamed, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Erin. We continue to really stay on top of stuff, and I really appreciate it given the circumstances for the last couple of years that we've had to operate on. I think there was a lot of fear amongst the mayors that we would start to lose some money, but I think you and your staff have done a significantly good job as far as making sure that we got our eyes and hands on every single penny on the table if need be. So I appreciate all your good efforts. Okay, moving then to IDOT, Bureau of Local Roads update, Chad Riddle.
Mayor, Chad couldn't join us today. So, you know, he asked me to let folks know, you know, if they have any questions, that we can relay those questions to them and get the ball moving. So no IDOT report today.
Anybody have any IDOT ideas or concerns that you'd like to express to the group? All right. Moving into 3.3, which is STP Project Selection Committee update, Kama.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. Since the last executive committee meeting, the STP Project Selection Committee has met twice on August 11th and September 1st. At those meetings, staff presented several methodology changes for committee discussion, including modifying the calculation of the Jobs Plus Household Score to better recognize the sub-regional reach of projects by comparing the number of households served by a project to the total number of households within the project area rather than the whole region. The committee did request some additional staff work on this proposal, which will be presented to them at their next meeting in November. Staff also proposed modifying the current transit station improvements category to include improvements to commuter rail yards and terminals as eligible activities, which the committee supported. The committee also generally supported setting minimum thresholds for funding consideration based on project need scores. For example, road reconstruction projects would not be eligible for funding if the pavement was in excellent or good condition. Minor modifications to the requirements for councils to assign sub-regional priority points were also proposed and supported by the committee. These modifications would ensure that councils are not swapping points with one another and are instead identifying projects that provide benefit to the residents and businesses within their subregion. Finally, in response to discussions had in July by both the STP and CMAP committees, staff proposed some options for discussion that would relax the requirement for preliminary engineering to be substantially complete in order to apply for funding, and would instead either limit future cost increases or limit the future phases eligible to be funded based on how far along sponsors are with their preliminary engineering. A final proposal on this topic will be presented to both committees in November. Moving on to the STP local programs, I just want to say thank you to all of you sitting around the table, to your transportation or technical committees, all of your members, and especially your staff. We will be presenting a series of 12 tip amendments to the CMAP Transportation Committee this Friday and to the MPO Policy Committee in October that include over $470 million in federal funding for 216 new locally sponsored projects. Although about 3/4 of the new projects are for road and bridge maintenance and modernization, something that became quite evident while reviewing the tip changes was that there are very few projects, actually less than 25 region-wide, that are limited to only resurfacing in this cycle. Instead, your local programs are doing so much more to improve safety, to add to, enhance, and repair the bicycle and pedestrian and ADA networks, to incorporate green infrastructure, and to address system vulnerability. So again, thank you to all of the councils for the hard work developing these programs this cycle. That was all I had for my report this morning. If there are any questions about the activities of the selection committee or the local programs, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions of Kama? Okay, then moving to item 3.4 on our agenda, making it better, CMAP's plan to help Northeastern Illinois improve accessibility. Linda Mastrian, are you here?
I am here. Thank you very much. Let me get my camera going here. Okay, so I think Jared is gonna do me the favor of advancing my slides for me. So I know that I introduced myself to you some time ago, but it's nice to be with you all again this morning, and wanted to just take a few minutes to give you some highlights on what we're doing to make it better for people with disabilities and all of us across the region. So next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through a brief roadmap of our project, starting with where we are today, the highlights of what's required under the ADA, what it really means for all of us, what we can do, and how we can make it better together. Next slide, please. And so we'll start with where we are today. So I think all of you are familiar at this point with where the sidewalk ends, the report from the MPC and the Great Lakes ADA Center, which kind of outlined for us some of the challenges that the region faces in terms of ADA compliance with the self-evaluation and transition plan requirements. But for me, the important thing is not to continue to look back, but to use this to set the ground to move forward. So we understand some of the challenges, and then and the fact that we have a lot of room to improve, and work for CMAP and all of us.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
No, Linda, I believe somebody is not muted. So if everybody could mute their.
Gotcha. Okay, I thought somebody had a question. So anyway, the whole point of this study really is that, you know, we know that we have room to improve. We know that there's work for us to do together to improve accessibility, to improve integration in our communities for people with disabilities and all of us. And so I really want to encourage us to use this to simply lay the baseline and to look forward. Next slide, please. So I'm sure that most of us know at this point that the ADA was signed into law in 1990, providing broad protections for people with disabilities, prohibiting discrimination in employment, state and local governments, public accommodations, telecommunications, and then a sort of broad catch-all category. And the premise of the law, of course, is that integration benefits not only people with disabilities, but all of us. That integrating people with disabilities into the fabric of our communities makes us stronger. It makes us more resilient and better off economically. And we learn that providing programs and services to people with disabilities benefits all of us. For example, curb cuts are used not just for people using wheelchairs and other mobility devices, but parents pushing strollers and people pulling luggage carts, right? And captions on televisions and screens, while originally intended to benefit deaf and hard of hearing people, we see all the time in noisy sports bars and crowded environments, right? So they benefit really all of us. And that's kind of the point here. So what I want to focus on is, in particular, Title II, the state and local government piece, including things like cities and towns and villages and counties and townships, and even unincorporated areas, and what are known, of course, as public entities. So let's just hit some of the highlights of the requirements, and then we'll get into more specifically what we want to do. So public entities, when we talk about public entities, we're talking about all the programs and services that we offer, right? Not only your police and fire and EMS and courthouses and park district programs and places you might go to pay fines or register a business, all of those things, but also transit stops and stations, parking, sidewalks, curb cuts, and all of those things. And the important thing to know is that no matter how many of these programs or services or facilities an entity has, all public entities, no matter how many employees that they have to do two things, right? Conduct a self-evaluation and provide public notice about the requirements under the ADA to your public. Next slide, please. And we also know that public entities with 50 or more employees have a few additional requirements. They have to designate an ADA coordinator, which, as all of you may know, can be either a single standalone position, or it may be an additional title for someone who has other responsibilities. But that person is really overall responsible for ensuring the public entity's compliance with the ADA requirements. The second really important piece here is establishing a grievance procedure. And what does that do? That helps to provide a mechanism for people who believe they've been discriminated against to file a complaint and to have that complaint addressed and heard and decided on in a timely manner. And then the third thing is, in addition to the requirements that all entities have, is to develop and implement a transition plan. But I want to go back for a second to the self-evaluation and share a couple of key points about that. So first, the main point of conducting a self-evaluation is what? It's to do an assessment, right, of your programs, your services, your physical facilities, your policies, along with an identification of any barriers that are preventing the full participation of people with disabilities in those programs and services. And then the transition plan is the necessary next step. It takes all the information from that carefully done self-evaluation and creates a roadmap that not only addresses compliance with the law, but how you're going to integrate and include people with disabilities into all these programs and services and provide access to these physical facilities. So that plan has to have a couple of things: a timeline, a budget, and it has to designate the person or people who will be responsible for its implementation. Next slide, please. So now let's just take a couple of minutes to talk about what all that means for all of us here today. Next slide. So you may or may not know that current US Census and American Community Survey data tell us that there's somewhere around 61 million Americans living with a disability today. And contrary to the belief that people with disabilities mostly exist on government benefits or live in subsidized housing or have no disposable income, there's studies that tell us a very different story. In fact, we know that people with disabilities worldwide have over $8 trillion in purchasing power annually. And in the United States alone, that number is $490 billion in disposable income annually that people with disabilities have in the United States. And so what this tells me is I think about communities building, rebuilding, looking to grow their economies and expand their tax base. And it seems to me that we all might want to tap into the power of that marketplace, right? And so the idea is by including, integrating people with disabilities, that we're becoming more equitable. We're providing people with disabilities opportunities to live and work and play in our own communities, and as a result, becoming part of that economic engine, driving that growth that we want to see. And so now we've talked a little bit about what it means. Let's talk about what we can do. Next slide. So I want to just spend a couple minutes here talking about what we as CMAP, all of you as individuals, advocates, government officials, family members, what we all can do together to move the needle on integrating and including people with disabilities into our communities across this region. And I know that at times it can feel a little bit overwhelming and like not even knowing where to begin, but I'd like to start us out by talking about a few of the things that CMAP has planned to help our communities, to improve accessibility, to integrate people with disabilities, and to ultimately improve our economies. Next slide. So we're focused on a couple of key pieces, creating a multifaceted program that really meets all of us where we are. We're each on our own journey when it comes to self-evaluation, transition plan, figuring out how to provide accessibility in our own communities. And it's not one size fits all, we know that. And so the program that we're developing can't be one size fits all either. So we're really focused on a couple of key things, providing education and training for public entities, advocates, and allies to ground us all in the requirements, the reasons for the law, and how to implement those requirements successfully. We'll be engaging in outreach to and with public entities like yourselves, disability stakeholder organizations who are really key players in this process, and others as well, to inspire, to educate, to inform, and to create evangelists for the need to do this work and to take it forward. We'll be providing real-time on-demand technical assistance to communities to guide them along in the process. And we're developing a toolbox of resources, including templates and checklists and materials to aid in completion with self-evaluations and transition plans and all of the things that are required. Next slide, please. So let's wrap up by talking about how we can work together to make it better. Next slide. So as the MPO for the region, CMAP is responsible, of course, to make sure that the municipalities receiving transportation funds comply with their obligations under the law. And while we're taking the lead and developing the training and the outreach and the technical assistance and tools that I've mentioned to make it easier for all of us, we recognize that not one of us can do this alone. It's a significant effort. It's a monumental effort, in fact. And it takes more than just one of us, one person, one organization to make this happen. It really takes all of us, public entities, officials, disability stakeholders, CMAP, and the broader community working together to make this happen. And I'm confident that we can do it, and that together we can build an accessible and inclusive region where people with disabilities are able to live and work and play successfully side by side. Next slide. And this is my email, almastandria@cmap.illinois.gov. If you have questions, need information, want to participate in any of the training and educational efforts or need any assistance, that's where you can find me. And next slide. I want to thank you for listening, and I'm happy, I don't know if we have time in the agenda, if there's questions or comments. I know that was a very fast overview, but happy to entertain any questions or comments if we have time in the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Does anybody on the board have a question for Linda? I just will throw one out because in Batavia, I have a very large senior citizen population. I have 6 different senior and living communities within my community. And so my big challenge out here in dealing with folks with disabilities or the senior folks is many of them have 0 computer skill. They will tell you that I graduated from high school before 1970, and I never saw no computer in any school classroom I was ever in. And so I have this they call themselves the lost generation, because when you say, you know, well, zoom it in or look at it on your app or your cell phone, many of them, if they got a cell phone, it's one that just has the phone on it. It doesn't have anything else with it. That's just the way they have to do it. I guess where I'm coming from is that we are trying to figure out ways in which we can communicate and serve these folks. And one of the things we've done now is if you're a senior citizen or somebody with a handicap in Batavia, you can call the fire department on our non-emergency number, and we will come over to your house and we'll erect a key box near your door, in which if something happens, we will have the ability to go to that key box, open it up, get the key for your house or apartment or whatever out of it, and get in to find out what's going on. That's one of the more popular things we do, but that's about as basic as you can be as far as trying to help folks. But I guess I find myself as the mayor somewhat frustrated, because these folks really are lacking any computer or technological skill. And so that seems to be one of the big barriers that I'm dealing with out here. And I know in talking to some of the other members on the executive board here, they've had this similar type of situation. So I don't know what there is we can do about that, but that seems. Another thing we've recently started is, if you don't have a smoke detector in your house, you call us, we'll come over and put one in. And then we're even now to the extreme where we'll come back and rechange your battery out. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but some of it is really basic stuff. And the younger generation hears about this and just shakes their head that these people are so lost in technology that they don't have any ability. But I think Linda and her team at CMAP really are trying to stay on top of, you know, the factors that are out there impacting the seniors and the disability communities. And this really is one of the more important assignments that I think we have as a region. So I'll get off my soapbox, but thank you for your good efforts, Linda.
Thank you. And just very quickly, I appreciate your comments. And it is a challenge because there is such a range of ability and technological capability, right, across the range of disability, of age, all of these things. And so we do have to be mindful of the fact that we have to have everything from the highest tech to the lowest tech and everything in between in the way we engage and do outreach and all of that. And so while, you know, I talked very much about our web-based tools and things like that today, as part of our outreach and engagement efforts, we certainly will be touching on those low and no tech methods too, to reach people, like I said, where they are. But thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate it and look forward to working with you.
Yeah, I think it's important that all of us at our levels as the mayors and village presidents have an understanding of the challenge. And I think every town's got this same situation. There's some of them less than others, but there's handicapped people from a technological standpoint that is a very predominant issue in many towns. So, all right, well, thank you. Okay, we'll move to 3.5, which is the RTA strategic plan. Peter Kersten.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Kersten. I'm a principal planner with the RTA strategic planning group. I have with me also Anthony Cefali from our government affairs group. And I'm here today to give you a brief update on our regional transit strategic plan development. Go ahead to the next slide. So it goes without saying, but COVID has permanently changed our region and its transit system. Transit provided an essential lifeline throughout the pandemic, but often does not serve riders as well as it could. The RTA is committed to change that will not just meet this moment, but change that will help us prepare for what is next. Next slide. Recall that our regional transit system is funded from public funding, so that's primarily sales tax, as well as operating revenue, which is primarily fares paid by riders. The regional transit system currently provides about 900,000 trips on a typical weekday, but that's only about half of what we were doing in 2019 before the pandemic. With fewer riders paying fares, our current funding will not be enough to keep transit running at current levels when COVID relief dollars run out. In 2026, we could have a regional transit budget deficit of more than $700 million, which is about 20% of the annual operating budget. And so that's what the graphic on the slide here is showing, is a projection of that gap in relation to our total operating expense. Next slide. For the last year, we've been working with many stakeholders, perhaps some of you on this call have been involved, from across the region to establish a vision informed by a 10-year financial plan for the system. Through this effort, we've developed priority goals and strategies and are growing a coalition ready to work with us to achieve them. Go ahead to the next slide. So I'm here today because we hope that you'll join us in supporting a handful of ideas that we believe are ready for advocacy in action in 2023. The complete list of advocacy in action is included in the agenda. There's a link to it in the agenda that you can view. The items on the list come from the stakeholder working groups. So that these were developed in cooperation with partners and stakeholders from throughout the region. The advocacy items on this list include longer term, kind of more substantive changes to how our regional transit system works, and largely include changes that the RTA and the service boards, or CTA, Metra, and PACE, would need support from stakeholders to accomplish. Support such as CMAP, support such as other units of government throughout the region. So this includes seeking new sustainable funding for transit, as we kind of shared at the outset. Supporting communities' efforts to improve areas around stations and stops, and working with roadway agencies to prioritize transit-friendly streets. The other side of the list, the action items, have the potential to be a bit more immediate. They may not be easy, but will certainly help address some of the changing and unmet needs of riders in the communities that we serve. These are things the RTA and the service boards, again, CTA, Metra, and PACE, can take the lead to implement with support from stakeholders. So these include things like improvements to safety, making paying for transit more seamless and affordable across the regional system, as well as accelerating the transition to near zero emissions. So again, the complete list of advocacy and action items is linked in the agenda. Go ahead to the next slide. So there are going to be a number of ways to continue to engage with us as we work towards our draft plan in early December. So that includes, providing any comments or questions today live with me on the phone here, as well as we have a public survey that is available currently. I think Anthony is able to add that as a link to the chat. You can also find that on our website, on our social media pages. And as well, we'd be happy to schedule a follow-up meeting to talk more in person. If your community or your constituents would like to hear from us directly and provide input, we would welcome that opportunity. Some other specific future engagement touch points that we're planning. We are attending in-person events to meet with riders throughout the region. Some of those have already taken place and will continue now through October. We'll also present updates at this September board meeting for the RTA, which is on Thursday. We'll be back at the October board meeting. You'll probably be hearing from us a lot at our board. And then again, the draft strategic plan will come out in early December for public comment, working towards an adoption in February of 2023. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. On the screen here are a couple more ways to stay connected with this work and all of the work of the RTA. I'd be happy to pause here if there are any questions or comments from the group.
Do we have any questions for Peter from the group? Well, thank you and to the RTA for your continued progressive ideas here of how we better can communicate and serve our constituency. And as you say, the COVID thing really upset the apple cart, but I think we're now getting it back into shape and hopefully we can move forward. And certainly the RTA has been at the front end of this thing from the very beginning, trying to do everything it can to kind of hold on and repair the damage that was done and move forward. I think we're in a good position in a lot of respects for what we have ideas that we want to do and will be doing.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Okay, moving to 3.6, the legislative update from John Carpenter.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. We've updated both of our advocacy agendas for the upcoming sessions of both the Congress and the Illinois General Assembly. The updated versions reflect policy and legislative recommendations that will be needed to fully leverage all the new opportunities available to the region with the passage of historic legislation like IIJA and CJA. These advocacy agendas were realigned to reflect CMAP's core focus areas and standing committees of transportation, climate, and regional economy. Similar to the intent of the intent of those committees, and aligning with the nature of CMAP as the region's planning agency, you'll find transportation recommendations spread throughout the agenda, where they comprehensively address the agency's climate and regional economic competitive goals. As Erin mentioned in her report, in addition to the individual recommendations you see, each will have a primary focus. On the federal side, the focus will be promoting the list of priority projects that are currently being developed with the support of the region's implementers and working with our partners on making those a reality. On the state side, our focus will be centered on securing funding support for the full implementation of the Regional Planning Act. At this point, I'll let Tim and Kasia brief you on the overview of each agendas. Tim?
Great, thanks, John. And Jared, if you could go to the next slide, and then the slide after that, I'll go over the federal part of this. So good morning, everyone. My name is Tim McMahon. I'm an Intergovernmental Affairs Senior on our Intergovernmental Affairs team, and I focus on our federal engagement efforts. So beginning with the transportation section of our agenda, and as John said, we've realigned this year's agenda to reflect our three core focus areas and our committee areas of transportation, climate, and regional economy. So beginning with transportation, obviously our primary focus is on the successful implementation of the massive Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So that includes increasing local access to funding programs that were authorized but have yet to be funded. So that's the Healthy Streets program for resilient infrastructure investments and the Active Transportation Infrastructure program for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Both of these programs we were very excited about, and they would be great resources directly for the region and our communities. It also includes within that section increasing local access to federal safety formula funds so that MPOs have the funding that we need to meet federal safety performance management goals at the regional level. The last section in that transportation category has been a longstanding recommendation for us on all levels of government, which is sustainably funding the transportation system. So at the federal level, that includes the development of new innovative funding mechanisms or pilots nationally, such as a road usage charge. Turning over to the climate section recommendations, where the main focus is on reducing emissions and enhancing the resilience of the region. The first section there is primarily focused on strengthening the transit system. As we just heard from our friends at the RTA, operating support and other transit assistance is going to be a priority in the coming years. And both of these things received bipartisan historic levels of operating support during the pandemic, and will continue to need that support as ridership rebounds in the coming years. The next section captures our resilience recommendations, including ensuring the region-wide resilience plan that CMAP is developing can be used to increase the federal share to 90% for all of those new Protect, Resilience Formula, and competitive funds. And then shifting over to that last category on regional economic competitiveness, beginning with the first section of recommendations, which is supporting the flow of people and goods through the region. This section includes continued calls for federal programs to increase support for communities to mitigate against the impacts of increased freight movement, including more transparent and regularly updated information on grade crossing delays and a prioritization within new programs like the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program to focus on communities seeing increased delays and congestion due to that freight traffic. During the pandemic, the Economic Development Administration received historic levels of funding for regional investment for programs like the Build Back Better Challenge. This one-time funding was very popular. It was regional in focus and it was oversubscribed and should be continued long-term. We have that included under our inclusive economic growth section as a priority. And then the final recommendation or list of individual recommendations for that section includes another long-standing one we've had, which is to increase more comprehensive support for investment decisions at the intersection of housing, economic development, and transportation. Specifically, regions like CMAP would like to see more comprehensive support and technical assistance, not only from USDOT, but also, you know, the Housing and Urban Development Administration, as well as the Economic Development Administration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kasha for an overview of our state agenda, and I look forward to taking any questions you may have. And I think we can go to the next slide too, Jared. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you. My name is Kasha Hart, and I'm the new Intergovernmental Affairs Senior at CMAP, focusing on state and local affairs. So the draft state agenda is broken out into the same categories as the federal agenda, with some similar subcategories as well. Transportation funding and finance reform has been a long-standing component of CMAP's legislative work. In the report that CMAP has been directed to do with, in coordination with the RTA by the General Assembly on the future of transit funding, is going to continue to inform how these recommendations evolve over time. We also know there is a lot to be done in order to make our streets safer for all roadway users. And, you know, as Erin has noted, our traffic safety data continues to trend in the wrong direction. As CMAP continues to define and grow our safe and complete streets body of work, you will see in our agenda, we have more items related to promoting traffic safety and improving access to safe cycling and walking infrastructure. Finally, transportation, innovation, and transparency have also consistently been part of our agendas. It's particularly important, you know, given our role as the data hub for the region. This year, we're really thinking about this through the lens of federal funding and instituting performance-based planning and project selection measures for IIJA funded investments. Moving on to our next category of regional economic competitiveness. As with transportation, many of the items included in this section are really based on to 2050, the plan update. This section also draws upon some recommendations that have been identified in some other bodies of CMAP's research. So for example, CMAP's local development incentives report included a number of recommendations around how to improve access to development incentive data. And this is an important first step to assessing the impact of these programs within our region. Additionally, we have included a couple of recommendations from our fees, fines, and fares report, as they are complementary to some of the safe and complete streets recommendations included in our transportation section around increasing traffic safety enforcement. And then finally, our section on climate. Not only has integrated water resources management been a key part of CMAP's legislative agenda for some time, but this is an issue that touches every community in our region, you know, as evidenced by this past weekend, whether it's flooding, water quality issues, water supply, or some combination of the above. There's also a space where there are a number of regional solutions that we can pursue, and a lack of investment can yield some significant health and economic impacts. Additionally, we included a section on reducing transportation emissions. So this discusses new federal requirements around measuring on-road GHG emissions and thinking about how we can be strategic in developing some parallel processes at the state level in this space. And this is also about CEJA implementation and ensuring local governments are supported in their role to reduce emissions and invest in a clean energy workforce. So with that, I will turn it back to John to discuss our next steps.
Thank you, Kasha. Briefly to wrap up here, in the next few weeks, CMAP anticipates receiving a one-year $175,000 appropriation through Senator Durbin's office from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to fund CMAP's Incorporating Equity and Flood Resilience Investments for Northeast Illinois project. This project will help address flooding inequities by helping county and local governments equitably prioritize flood resilience projects to address the needs of those most vulnerable to climate change. Also, CMAP recently received funding from the Illinois EPA to support the implementation of an area-wide water quality management plan with over $160,000 of support through IEPA's Section 604 funding. And finally, CMAP is currently in the process of convening our partners to coordinate and submit a regional grant application for the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All funding opportunity established through IIJA to support the development of action plans. The deadline to submit is coming up September 15th, 2022. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. That concludes our report.
Any questions for the CMAP staff on the legislative arena? You know, I guess this is the day for me to shoot my mouth off here, but I just want to, number one, say I think the staff has done a wonderful job of trying to identify the legislative issues that we need to focus on. There's just one little external thing that's kind of hanging above all this that I'm sure many of the mayors on the call have seen or heard it like I have. The remapping of this Northern Illinois after the last census was a real unique piece of work. And there's my town, I don't have any state senator, congressman, or state representative who was our representative before is under the new map. We got all new people here. And I've got a lot of people. We got the League of Women Voters out now trying to appear before various groups to talk about this. And I went to one meeting on Sunday with them, and I had to stand up and defend the League of Women Voters because they were being attacked by these irate people about, what do you mean they changed all my congressmen and state representatives? And this is a big political sham and whatever. So I don't know where this is all going, but I think the November election is going to be a very unique exercise because there's been some real shaking of the box here as to who's representing who. And many people are telling me, I don't even know who my state senator or state representative or congressman is because they've messed with the map so much. So that's just a little sidebar to what's going on in the legislative world that I think you obviously are aware of, but I think it's going to be a very interesting exercise come November to see how this all shakes out. So much for my comment. Anybody else? All right, we'll go to four then, other business. Do we have anybody on the Council of Mayors that wants to bring anything up?
Jeff,
yeah.
Schilke, Karen Darch, Barrington, I guess it's a comment. Interestingly, in the presentation of the RTA strategic plan, I think the comment was COVID has permanently changed things. And granted, there have definitely been changes. And I'm sure some things are permanently changed, others maybe not so much. In the federal legislative report, I think the comment was watching for potentially a ridership rebound in transit. So my comment is, I know we're under the gun with like the 2026 lapse of funding for transit, but I think it's important, and especially for communities that are on a transit line and have relied on that. It's helped build their community that, and I'm sure RTA will take all of this into consideration, but is really careful in the timing of these decisions, because to make a quick decision or a quicker decision maybe than is prudent on realigning, where resources go in transit could be problematic for people, communities that have built themselves up and have a ton invested in ridership, and their people are here because of what is available. So I hope, and I'm sure everybody agrees, it should be a rising tide situation where you're helping everybody and that nobody really gets sunk. But I do think the timing element of not deciding that what we're seeing now is the way it's going to be post-COVID, because I think things are slowly changing. So anyway, that's my comment. I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining me on the soapbox. Anybody else?
Mayor Schulte, Mike Einhorn.
Yes.
I agree with Mayor Darch, but I also want to state that we got to be very careful, I think, because there's a lot at stake here, that we're not just being sold a bill of goods, and we have to be in the trust but verified mode, in my estimation, because sometimes what people try to tell you is going on is more self-serving than anything else. And I just think we need to keep our eyes open and our ear to the ground when we talk about making improvements that may be of a grandiose nature, but may not actually produce the kind of results that we all need. So just a comment.
Thank you. Very well taken. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move to public comment. Staff will read any comments received prior to today's meeting. If you wish to address the committee, please indicate it so in the chat box. The staff will call on you one at a time. Do we have any public comment today in the chat box or online?
There's nothing in the chat box as of this moment. So if anybody would like to be recognized, please put yourself in the chat box or unmute yourself and state who you are.
Well, it sounds like we don't have anybody out there that wants to chat with us today. So, well, according to the agenda that I have, we're kind of at the end of things. 6-0 is the next meeting. This is the final meeting of 2022. We have not yet scheduled meetings for the new year, but anticipate a meeting in January. Once the meetings have been scheduled, we will contact all the committee members and post the new dates on the CMAP website with plenty of advance notice. Any final comments from anybody? If not, then I guess I will adjourn the meeting and wish everyone to have a great day, and we'll see you all back here in 2023. And I think we worked this out that we don't have to vote on that, do we?
We do not.
Okay.
Meeting can be adjourned.
All right. Well, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank everybody for your participation.